football, so to speak. It also doubles as a basketball, but I take this with me when I
Good morning. I'd like to welcome you all to the John F. Kennedy School of Government here at Harvard, to the ARCO Forum for our second annual Queer Politics Conference. The theme of our conference this year is Bringing It Home, Gay Youth, Families, and the LGBT Movement. And there's a reason we've chosen the theme that we have. For the last few years, the biggest battles for the gay community have taken place over our families and our children. I think in years past that wasn't necessarily the case, but I think in the last few years we've seen a definite shift towards a focus on gay homes, gay families, and the more intimate portions of our lives. I mean, we're all familiar, for example, with the gay marriage debate that's taken place in Hawaii, most importantly, but there are also suits that have been filed in Vermont and Alaska, among other states. There have been battles over gay adoptions in the state of New Jersey, where we recently won an important court battle. And as you're going to hear, we've had battles about gay-straight alliances in high schools in the city of Salt Lake, in the state of Utah. So I think this panel is a good instance for us to take a look at where issues of gay youth and gay family are going and where we can expect the gay rights movement to end up in the next few years. Now, before we begin, I'd like to introduce someone who's going to be making some opening remarks this morning. That's former Governor of Oregon, Barbara Roberts. Governor Roberts has had an excellent record on gay rights issues throughout her time, both in office and here at the Kennedy School, in public life. When she was inaugurated as Secretary of State and Lieutenant Governor of Oregon in 1984, she had the Portland Gay Men's Chorus performing at her inauguration. It was the first time that a gay chorus was invited to a celebration in honor of a statewide official being inaugurated. During her time in office as governor, in 1990 to 1994, she appointed 5 openly gay and lesbian judges, more than any other time in Oregon's history. And she fought many of Oregon's notorious ballot measures, notably Ballot Measure 9, which would have led an attack on gay people in the state constitution. In response to that, she created the Summit on Building a Hate-Free Oregon. Now, when she was in office as governor, she joined the board of the Human Rights Campaign, the nation's largest gay rights organization. During her term, she made speeches all across the country in favor of gay rights. She currently serves on the executive committee of HRC, and she's the co-chair of their public policy committee. In addition, she's here at the Kennedy School working on state and local government initiatives. So I'd like to welcome an excellent friend of the gay rights movement and of Harvard University, Governor Barbara Roberts.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the audience, and Adam, thank you for the kind and very generous introduction. I'm thrilled to be back this year having a second chance at the second annual conference to address this group. We're here to focus today on a pledge, a promise that most of us learned as kids. And it was a promise from America to her citizens that gave them the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Lesbian and gay Americans seek nothing more than a guarantee of these basic rights, rights every American expects and deserves, yet rights that are still legally denied to gays, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgendered citizens in almost every city and every state in our nation. Your community asks no special privileges. It seeks no special rights. You simply seek an equal opportunity to have a good job, a decent education and home, and a loving family. That is certainly not, in my mind, an extremist agenda. It is, in fact, a human agenda. Parents, and because I'm one I know this, have very high hopes for their children. We wish for their success and for their happiness. We want our children, gay or straight, to be able to choose their life's work and their life's partners without fear, isolation, or discrimination. That ought to be a hope that every parent in this country can expect for their child. But your gay child has no such legal protection. No legal protection in the workplace, and no marriage protection in their home. In America, we should be able to expect more for every one of our citizens, and we should be able to expect much, much more from our political and legal systems. America's promise is, after all, one that is very clear: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And don't believe it when you hear the rhetoric that these changes simply can't happen because the support doesn't exist among Americans for this agenda of equality. 74% of American voters oppose job discrimination against gays and lesbians. 74%, that's a pretty clear place to be as polling goes. Voters do not want to make it illegal for lesbians and gays to adopt children. 55% of Americans would oppose such a law. And 63, I love this, 63% of American voters would oppose a law making it illegal for gay and lesbian couples to jointly adopt children. 52% of Americans support providing health care benefits to gay spouses, and 62% would provide inheritance rights to gay spouses. So believe me, public opinion is not the issue. In fact, public opinion is certainly not driving the wave of anti-gay marriage legislation. Only 13% of Americans said that passing the so-called Defense of Marriage Act should be an important priority. Only 13% of Americans. That doesn't sound to me like the extremist agenda is here. It sounds to me as if DOMA is the extremist agenda, and it is not an American agenda. So maybe the excuse for this ongoing injustice, if we have to find a place to point, the reason for this legal discrimination rests with politicians' belief that their political career is at risk if they vote for fairness and equality for gays and lesbians. Well, let me tell you, that just isn't so. When the mean-spirited, divisive Defense of Marriage Act came to Congress for a vote, 62 courageous members of Congress voted against that measure, and all 62 were re-elected. That's a really important political message. The current myth is that elected officials risk grave political consequences for standing against anti-gay marriage legislation. The actual experience is quite different. I'm going to give you 3 quick examples, and there are lots more of them. In 1996, in Colorado's legislature, House Minority Leader Diana DeGette led the opposition to the state DOMA bill. That same year, she ran for Congress and was elected to the U.S. House by 17 percentage points. In 1994, U.S. Representative Sam DeJaden was reelected by one of the narrowest margins in history. In 94, he only won by 21 votes. In July of 96, he voted no on DOMA. In the 96 re-election campaign, he won by 15,000 votes. Freshman Congresswoman Lynn Rivers faced a well-financed and very tough opponent in her 96 re-election race. In his effort to defeat Rivers, her opponent sent out 2 district-wide, very big, very comprehensive direct mail pieces that attacked Lynn for her vote against DOMA. Despite those ugly attacks and all the money that went into it, Congresswoman Rivers won with 57% of the vote. Now, those are important political messages directly from our citizens. They represent fairness and equal treatment when they vote that way. They, the voters, are ready, and I think they're willing to support politicians who stand up and do the right thing, even when it still remains controversial. Times are changing. Attitudes are changing. America is changing, and we can't ignore that. As the New York Times editorialized, chances are that Americans will look back 30 years from now and wonder what the hell all the fuss was about. Well, boy, do I hope that's true. If I live 30 years, I hope I get to see that. But if the government has a compelling interest in this whole debate, it should be to foster stable, long-term relationships, both gay and straight. And after all, it isn't the gay community that is creating the 50% divorce rate in this country. If conservatives in America really care about family values and are truly there to defend marriage in this society, they better find a way to stabilize and preserve the existing marriages and families in this nation, rather than spending their time standing in the way of gay and lesbian couples who simply ask to marry the partners they love and give those partners the legal protections and rights and responsibilities afforded heterosexual partners and spouses. A good home, a stable family, a lasting marriage is simply not about gender. It is about love and respect and understanding and a great deal of patience and communications. Every partner in every relationship deserves that love and respect, and if and when they are ready, the legal recognition by our culture of that love and of that commitment. And gay American youth need to feel respected and understood and safe in their schools, their homes, and their communities. They need strong support, not the hatred and harassment that drives too many of our kids to suicide, alcohol, drugs, and the streets. Fear is not a family value. Violence is not an educational strategy. Ignorance and false stereotypes and sort of head in the sand in our schools are not a framework to promote acceptance, diversity, and respect for every student. And the courage of more and more students to come out of the closet, to form student groups, and to just be who they are is one of the best educational strategies possible in this country. Today you're going to have a chance to meet and hear one such student, Kelly Peterson from Utah. Her story and the impact of her bravery and openness is truly inspiring. She is my idea of a real hero, and the support she received from her family is a model of love and what I consider real family values. And Andy Tobias, who was the executive producer, and many other people in this room who worked on a film, a video, that you'll have an opportunity to see in a few months. It's a video about Kelly, and it's about the history of gays and lesbians. It's called Out of the Past. And I've seen the video, and I've got to tell you, I think it should be shown in every school in this country and viewed by every single American. This is about opening the closet and letting in the light. And Kelly's story in this video do exactly that. This conference does that. Your being here and participating and learning opens the door just a little bit further. As Susan B. Anthony said many years ago in the fight for women's rights, never another season of silence. Dr. Martin Luther King pointed out we will not always be surrounded by supporters when it is time to speak out. Dr. King warned us that some people will be offended, and you know that. Some will be angry, and when you think about it, it's a small price to pay for doing what is right. And that's my message to Americans in every state when I speak around this country. And that is my message to political leaders in every jurisdiction in this country. We cannot be silent in the face of hatred. We cannot be accepting in the face of bigotry. We cannot be apathetic about inequality and legal discrimination. And today you're going to have an opportunity in just a minute to hear some of this community's most articulate and committed spokespersons and leaders. They have written, spoken, defended, and led in the name of equality and dignity. They are bringing the message home to America in your behalf. in Congress, the courts, legislative halls, school boards, and corporate boardrooms, they are helping build what I describe as a kinder and gentler America. I am privileged to be a foot soldier in this battle for equality and dignity and real family values for my fellow citizens, for gays and lesbians whose agenda is simply the full and equal citizenship that should be, if things were right, the hallmark of a great nation. And I cast my vote for equality. I ask you to be both a voter and a spokesperson for the cause. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you, Governor Roberts. I'd like to introduce our first panel, which is entitled Protecting and Empowering LGBT Youth. And moderating our panel today will be someone with strong ties to the local community, Jarrett Barrios. Jarrett Barrios is a graduate of Harvard College and a resident of the city of Cambridge. He's a local attorney who has distinguished himself in the progressive community for his work with immigrants and homeless people. In 1997, he was awarded the Pro Bono Attorney of the Year Award for his work representing immigrants by the Political Asylum and Immigrant Representation Project. He's also on the board of several organizations that help homeless people in the local area, including University Lutheran Church's homeless shelter and Centro Presente in the city of Cambridge. But in addition to his work helping these communities, he's also been a strong advocate for the gay community. He works with Men of Color Against AIDS, an organization where he's vice president, and he's on the board of directors of Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders. In addition, he's the chair of the Gay and Lesbian Anti-Violence Project. Now, currently, Jarrett is running for state representative here in Cambridge. If he's elected in November, he'll be the only Latino and the only gay man in the state legislature. So I hope you'll all join me in welcoming Jarrett Barrios and our entire panel today. Thank you.
Who's he? Thank you. I, however, am not making any speeches on my behalf today. I am just the moderator. And I have a very distinguished panel to introduce. But I just want to start by asking folks, are your mics turned on? Could you just test?
Hello?
Hello?
Hello. How's that for a chorus?
Like the Three Stooges.
I'm just going to really briefly lay out the rules of engagement, so to speak, today. We will have 5 to 7 minutes from each panelist, and then we're going to have questions and answers from you, the audience. So plan them well, and when it's time for your questions, I'm going to ask that everybody please come to the mic, because this might be shown on C-SPAN. Is that right? So in the event that it is, and it is being taped, we ask that everybody be heard, and to be heard, you need to come to the mic. I am, as it was introduced, from Cambridge. I live in Cambridge, and am very excited to have such an honored panel come to my city. Welcome, all of you. I'm going to introduce the three panelists now, and then each one will have 5 to 7 minutes, as I said, to speak, and then we can go to questions. The first panelist is going to be Richard Socarides. Many of you have probably read or heard about Mr. Socarides. His official title is, let me see if I get this right, Special Assistant to the President, that's the President of the United States, and Senior Advisor for Public Liaison at the White House. He's also Senior Counsel to the White House Chief of Staff and has been working, putting together a lot of these race relation dialogues which have been going on around the country, which we've heard a lot about. Significantly for our panel and for our community, he is also, and I'm actually not sure if this is an official title, but you can tell us about that, he's also the liaison to the lesbian and gay community. So he's our voice, as Governor Roberts told us, when we have stuff to talk about, and there are a lot of issues we need to talk about, he's our voice to the big guy. And he's going to be talking to us a little bit about some of his work in Washington with our community. After Mr. Socarides, we have Kelly Peterson. I'm not going to say a whole lot about Kelly. I hope that you can live up to that, that great introduction, Kelly. Kelly is the co-founder of the first Utah Gay Straight Alliance, and a lot of you may remember a lot of the hubbub that followed from that, where I guess the state banned all student groups in response to the formation of this organization. I'm sure Kelly has a lot of value and interesting stories to tell us about that. And after Kelly, we're going to have Kevin Jennings, who I've actually had the pleasure of knowing for about 10 years. Kevin lived in Cambridge for many years and then sadly moved away. Was a voter, in fact. But,
He only says that because I lived in his district.
but Kevin is currently the executive director for Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. and is, in fact, I think, the founder of that organization. Prior to that, he went to Harvard College, taught at Concord Academy, as well as a school in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and so has been a teacher as well as an activist in terms of involving gay and lesbian teachers and students and parents in the important concerns and advocacy on behalf of gay and lesbian youth. I'm now going to turn it over to Mr. Socarides, allow him to speak, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Thanks for that nice introduction. It's always nice to be introduced as the person whose voice is your voice to the big guy. Blame me if anything goes wrong. But really, thank you very much for having me part of this second annual Harvard Queer Politics Conference. Thank you, Governor Roberts, for all the work that you've done. Not many people know that President Clinton tried to steal Governor Roberts away from Harvard about a year ago, and we're sorry we didn't get her, but it was our loss was your gain. Thank you, Adam, also for organizing the conference, and everybody else. It's great to be here. I am especially pleased to be here today with two of the most thoughtful people in our movement, Kelly Peterson and Kevin Jennings. After all, it's not every day one gets to speak on a panel with someone who has one of the great, compelling personal stories of recent memory and another co-panelist who gave the Harvard oration at commencement. At least they let me speak first this morning. It is especially great to be at Harvard, and our discussion this morning is about protecting and empowering gay youth, and I feel slightly empowered this morning myself. You see, growing up, my father, a Harvard man himself, had only two things he really wanted from me. One was that I'd be straight, and the other was that I would go to Harvard. Well, I figure 1 out of 2 ain't bad, and he never said I really had to attend Harvard, just that I would go. So you've helped me fulfill a father's dream in one way today, and I thank you for that. I just want to say a few brief words. I think the most impressive thing about the gay youth movement today is that it has come so far in just 4 or 5 years, that kids in high schools all over the country are comfortable enough in their communities and with their families, and perhaps most importantly with themselves, to come out and take the enormous risks associated with that is really, truly remarkable. It was not that way when I was growing up. It was not that way at all, and it's hard to describe to a young person today what a dramatic transformation has really occurred. I remember, and I believe for a very long time, all through high school and college, that being an openly gay man would prevent me from having a career in public service, and that's because, very simply, I had no role models to teach me otherwise. Today, gay youth are no longer totally invisible, and that is truly an amazing thing, especially in a world where the tolerance level for gay adults is not that high yet. I think that to empower gay and lesbian youth, we must give them more role models, and we must give their issues some visibility. And I'd like to take just a brief moment to talk to you about the role the federal government is playing in that effort. Today, because the federal government, for the first time in history, has an employment non-discrimination policy which covers gays and lesbians, there are more than 130 gay and lesbian political appointees serving in the Clinton administration. That includes now people like Virginia Apuzzo, who is one of the founders of the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, who recently became the highest-ranking gay or lesbian official to serve in the federal government in history. She was appointed by the president to be one of 18 assistants to the president. She outranks most everybody in the U.S. military, save perhaps the Secretary of Defense. And it was interesting because when she was appointed and was sworn in by the president, she recalled in her remarks that the last time she had been at the White House, she was arrested in front of the building protesting President Bush's AIDS funding. We also now are in the middle of two very bitter nomination struggles. James Hormel, a well-known San Francisco philanthropist who's been appointed by, openly gay philanthropist who's been appointed by President Clinton to be ambassador to Luxembourg. When he is confirmed, I was going to say were he confirmed, but we're confident he will be confirmed. And when he is confirmed, he will be the first person ever to serve as a openly gay person ever to serve as a United States ambassador. Fred Hochberg, who currently serves as the chair of the Human Rights Campaign Board, where Governor Roberts has served for so long, has been nominated to be Assistant Administrator of the Small Business Administration, which would be the first time an openly gay person served in the role of a Deputy Cabinet Secretary. These, I think, importantly, are our role models, or at least the role models where the federal government can play a role. And we think that that's been very important work over the last 5 or 6 years. This past year also, President Clinton included representatives of gay youth groups for the first time in his meeting with gay and lesbian leaders. And Kevin Jennings was there, and representatives from PFLAG and the trailblazing Hedrick Martin Institute in New York. And for the very first time, you had an American president at the White House holding a meeting where a significant part of the agenda were gay and lesbian youth issues. Kelly Peterson also recently met with the president. Vice President and Mrs. Gore have made it an important feature of their annual family conference in Tennessee to include representatives of gay and lesbian youth. So things in Washington, in terms of visibility and in terms of creating role models, I think really are changing. We've also taken some recent steps to help protect the health and safety of gay youth. Last year, the Department of Education, a full year before the Supreme Court's recent ruling in the Onkal case, held that Title IX of the U.S. Code prohibited sexual harassment of gay and lesbian youth in our nation's schools. This significant regulation has, and we hope will continue, to empower the staff of the Federal Education Department to work more aggressively to curtail violence in our nation's schools against gays and lesbians. Now, clearly, Title IX doesn't cover all types of harassment, but what the Education Department ruled is that gay and lesbian youth could be a part of a sexual harassment claim, and I think many people say that this is potentially the biggest step the federal government has taken in the last 5 or 6 years to help protect gay and lesbian youth. Representatives of gay groups like Ray Carey of the National Youth Advocacy Coalition and others were included in last year's White House Hate Crimes Conference, where the Attorney General singled out Assemblymember Sheila Kuehl from California for her legislation banning discrimination against gay youth in California, and where the President, for the first time, introduced legislation that would make it a federal crime to commit a bias-related crime against a gay or lesbian person. The Federal Department of Justice and Education have recently released a manual for schools across the country called Preventing Youth Hate Crimes, a little show and tell. And it deals openly and honestly with violence directed at gay youth in schools. Now, also for the first time, the Centers for Disease Control, a part of the Federal Department of Health and Human Services, is funding important studies that tell us so much about gay youth at risk. Studies which tell us that gay identified students are 5 times more likely to miss school because they feel unsafe, 7 times more likely to be threatened or injured with a weapon at school, or 4 times more likely to have attempted suicide. And the important thing is the CDC is working on expanding these studies. They're only happening now in a couple of states. I think in conclusion, I would say that with all that's being done, these statistics I've just read, you really underscore that we are just at the beginning of finding ways to help and be part of this effort as the federal government. So I look forward to this discussion, and I look forward to learning from you what you think the priorities are. Thank you very much.
Okay. My name is Kelly Peterson. To understand where I was coming from when I started the Gay Straight Alliance, you need to understand what happened to me in the years before. I began realizing I was having different feelings from the girls I knew when I was in about 6th grade. I knew I liked my friends in more ways than I would like my friends. But I didn't have a name for these feelings, because in sex ed in Salt Lake City, you're only taught that boys have this part and girls have this part, but that's about it. So I had no idea what was going on. During the years when I was realizing I was gay, I knew this was not okay. I was not going to be okay with my friends, and my friends were not going to be okay with me. So I decided nobody needed to know I was gay, and I could change myself if I tried hard enough. And that's what I went about doing for the better part of my adolescence. When I was in 9th grade, I was gay bashed, even though nobody knew I was gay. The girls' reasons were that I was taller, stronger, and I could run faster. If that's what a lesbian is, then I guess that half the Olympic team is. I decided nobody needed to know about that either, because if I was being gay bashed, then I must be gay. So I told my mother, when she asked where all the bruises came from, that the girls in gym class got a little rough with me, and it happened to everybody. So during this process, I was still trying to change myself, but there were rumors going around my high school that I was a lesbian. In 10th grade, I was raped at school by a fellow student. And I thought that I deserved this as well because I was a lesbian, and why shouldn't people treat me horribly? Because I was a horrible person. More minor incidences happened over the years after that, and I had such a feeling of being nameless and powerless, and it just kept building inside me. And I think I was at the breaking point when I decided no more. And I came out to the entire school, and it was like just all the weight of the world had been lifted off my back, and I wanted to go running down the hall screaming, I'm gay, I don't care what you think about me, I'm gay, ha ha. I didn't do that, but oh well. But what I did do was I took my first steps toward being empowered. I refused to be a victim anymore. Nobody was going to pick on me because it wasn't okay anymore. The second step I took was taking something positive from all the negative experiences I'd had during my life. And the third thing I decided was that nobody should have to go through this again. That was when the Gay Straight Alliance began. In September of 1995, a group of 20 high school students led by myself, Aaron Weiser, and Johnny Tuero got together to plan the birth of Utah's first Gay Straight Student Alliance. The majority of us were from East. By October, we'd found the required teacher sponsor, we'd drafted our formal mission statement, and we had it signed by 10 students. That's a pretty big step to take in a school like that. The principal looked over it, and he began meeting with us. He has always been very supportive of us. He looks at his students as if we were his children, and he wants all of his children to feel safe in their home. He was, however, very concerned because Utah is very, very conservative. And he consulted the district attorney because he figured you go to the highest power to get the best answer. So the club was legal under Equal Access Act, which was, oddly enough, sponsored by a conservative Utah senator. We discussed the issue with the student body government after we were approved by the district attorney, and this is usually just, just the normal process for becoming a club. The student body government was extremely hostile and unwelcoming of us, so the principal bypassed that. He decided that if the students couldn't handle it, and if they couldn't be adults, then the adults would handle it, and we'd be okay. During winter break, a press release was made about us. The timing was deliberate because Kay Peterson, the principal, decided he didn't want us being harassed by the press or other students when they found out that we were existing in the school. The club began being used as a dividing issue because it was an election year. Any politician that supported us was automatically pro-gay, and they were considered to be just on the fringe. Public forums and marches and rallies began being held, and the club was now a big political issue. On March 22nd in 1996, the school board voted to ban all non-curricular clubs rather than allow our club to meet. The new policy, however, didn't begin until the next fall, so we had the rest of the year to be a club. We did as much as we could for the last few months. We held a prom and went to movies, and we just did everything that we'd planned on doing from the beginning. And at the end of the year, 2 bills were introduced by the Utah legislature. The first bill introduced banned all gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered people from being hired at, teaching at, being employed by, volunteering at, or otherwise participating in Utah schools. It also prohibited school employees from discussing homosexuality in their private lives. This bill failed. That's not the good news. The second bill that was introduced banned all school clubs that dealt with bigotry, criminal behavior, and human sexuality. That bill passed. For the 1996-97 school year, my former partner and co-founder Aaron Weiser took over as the new leader of the GSA, and they were renting their room under the Civic Center Act. So there was really no problem with them meeting, and now all the kids from all the other schools could come. My sister Holly and Elizabeth Benson are now running the GSA as co-presidents. There are about 30 kids going now from 3 different high schools. And I'd like to wrap this up because I'm sure some of you have questions about the suicide of Jacob Orozco. What I can tell you about Jacob Orozco's death would take about 10 seconds. On September 3rd, 1997, at approximately 3 o'clock in the morning, Jacob Orozco hung himself. Jacob left no note, there was no autopsy, and Jacob was not buried. He was cremated. And Jacob probably did not kill himself because he was gay. The gay community has used Jacob's suicide as a political button to push against people to say, you know, see what you did to him, he killed himself. How terrible you must feel. But the person that they're pushing towards the conservative right is not Jacob. Jacob really didn't care that he was gay. It was just a non-issue for him. But the reason why people push Jacob being gay into the spotlight was that was the only facet of his life that they knew about. I won't go into every detail about why Jacob probably killed himself, but I mean, his life was horrible. Outside of being gay, that didn't even measure up. But the Gay-Straight Alliance continued on even stronger after his suicide, and if anything, it brought them back together. The Gay-Straight Alliance has now filed a discrimination suit against the Salt Lake City School Board, and the ACLU and Lambda Legal Defense are now defending them. Thank you.
Hi. Jarrett referenced my growing up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and anybody who knows people from the South knows the idea that we could restrain ourselves to 5 to 7 minutes. It's kind of a remarkable idea. You ask people in Winston-Salem, where's the McDonald's? And you get, now, McDonald's is right next to where my Aunt Susie used to live. Now, Aunt Susie's parents, Paula and James, and then like 10 minutes later, you're like, where's the fucking McDonald's? The fact of the matter is I will try very hard to keep myself to 5 to 7 minutes. This will be a major miracle should I achieve it. Particularly since I'm having all these different waves of nostalgia. The last time I was in this space was in 1987 in the Boston premiere of The Normal Heart, Larry Kramer's play about AIDS, in which I played Larry's partner who dies of AIDS in the last scene. And so I can't help but think about how much has changed in the 11 years since then. It seemed absolutely scandalous and remarkable in 1987 that the ARCO Forum would sponsor a play in which 2 people kissed each other of the same sex. And to now have the leader of the Institute of Politics be on the board of the Human Rights Campaign, we really have come a long way. And for me personally, since in 1987 I was a closeted history teacher with Courtney Jocelyn, sitting in the audience as one of my students, and to see her back in a very different role as well as myself. And in fact, some of the students from my classes came to see the play not knowing what it was about, were so shocked to see me kiss another man. But it's we've come a long way, baby, as they say. 2 of the reasons are sitting here. I want to thank Richard Socarides for making sure that this issue has been on the president's front burner. In 1993, when the president met with leaders in the lesbian and gay community, there was no talk of lesbian and gay youth issues, no talk of homophobia in schools. This was simply not on the radar screen. Richard made sure that a quarter of the representatives this time were people who addressed that issue, and I'd say roughly a third of the meeting focused on it. And change often proceeds from very incremental inside steps that are not visible to the outside world. And people who take those steps, they're not giving big dramatic speeches and getting documentaries made about them, but those steps are critical. And I'm very grateful for Richard fighting the good fight from within the system, which is an often harder fight to fight than from outside. And in addition, Kelly, obviously, as you're all about to learn when Out of the Past is broadcast on PBS in October, has made history herself. Why is all of this suddenly coming to light, and why haven't we talked about it really before? Well, you can take the history teacher out of the classroom. You cannot take the classroom out of the history teacher. So we're going to have a little history lesson. Since Richard was talking about what the federal government does today, I thought you might like to know about the federal government's first statements about gay people. A Senate report published in 1950 called Employment of Homosexuals and Other Sex Perverts by the Federal Government. The first published report ever by our government on gay people. You might know that in 1950, in the middle of the McCarthy scare, there was also the feeling that not only were communists giving away our secrets, but queers were as well, so they commissioned an investigation. And there were two reasons why you should not employ gay people in the government, according to their findings. Number one, we were emotionally fragile and we would crack quickly under interrogation and give away all our secrets. The inaccurate reason, number two, was that we would encourage younger federal employees to become homosexuals. So that was the main reason why gay people should not be employed by the federal government, 1950. Now, many of you have noticed, particularly in Cambridge, I think was the first city in Massachusetts to have a recycling law, that right-wing people are often against recycling unless what they're recycling is ideas. Now, ideas they recycle a lot. In 1977, they were back. Anita Bryant, and I'm sure the undergraduates are too young to remember who she was. She was a former Miss Oklahoma and a runner-up for Miss America who lived in Dade County, Florida, and was a spokesperson for the Florida orange juice industry. We all discovered to our horror in 1977 that she was not just for breakfast anymore. She was also for homophobia. When the Dade County passed a gay rights ordinance, she started a national campaign called Save Our Children, which led to the repeal of the gay rights ordinance in not only Dade County, but in many other cities across the nation. And of course, in 1994, in Governor Roberts' home state of Oregon, the latest ballot initiative was flown under the slogan of Protect Our Children. The same myth comes up over and over and over again of you have to protect children from gay people, despite documented statistics that show that a child is 100 times more likely to be molested by a straight man than by a woman or a man who is gay. So if we really were going to take this logical extreme, what we need to ban would be straight men from working with our children. But like Governor Roberts, I do not believe in discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, so I would never support such a law. And actually, if you go back further in history, you begin to realize we're not unique. Jews were attacked for supposedly drinking the blood of Christian children in Passover Seders. Black men were lynched for supposedly raping little white girls. Why? Well, if you're a parent, you know. If you want to drive a parent crazy and make them act irrationally, tell them someone's after your kid. And this has been the reason why we as a community, the gay and lesbian community, have avoided this issue ourselves often, because we did not want to be accused of recruiting. Why are we being forced to address it now? Thank you to Kelly Peterson and other people like her, young people who are not willing to wait around for the adults to get their shit together. Excuse me if I'm on C-SPAN, I suppose I probably just got us banned. The young people are coming out at younger ages, and the most interesting shift in the gay community right now, it's a very interesting historical shift. Homophobia in schools and what it does to people is not new. All of us who are older know that. We remember hearing faggot in schools. It's not like there was some Edenic time in which schools were tolerant toward gay people and that suddenly shifted and that's why it's in the news. What's shifted is that young people won't take it anymore. I recently met a man about my age in Cleveland, Ohio, and he was telling me that he was so traumatized in his gym class when he was in junior high. It was such a horrible experience for him as a gay person that he just went out to his family's car one day. He opened the door, he put his hand in, and he slammed the door shut to break his hand so he could get out of gym class for a semester. Okay? So we know that this type of bigotry has been there for a long time. The bigotry has not gone away, but what has changed is the attitude of the young people in confronting the bigotry. And that's why I say right now we are in the best of times and the worst of times. The best of times in that there is a new attitude of resistance, a new level of organizing. There are gay-straight alliances in 33 states, but also that greater visibility is leading to greater backlash and greater attacks. Let me share with you a letter. I chose this because of Governor Roberts, received by our Glisson, Oregon chapter a couple of months ago. To Ron Bloodworth and other Glisson, Oregon members. Hi, everybody. Ron knows me and asked me to report the circumstances of my attack. My name is Paul G. Miller. I'm 17 years old and the organizer of the Gay-Straight Alliance at Corvallis High School. On Monday, February 2nd at 2:30 p.m., I was walking the 4 blocks from the high school to my home. A student across the street asked if I was a homosexual. I responded that I was, and he ran into the house saying, "Hey guys, let's go faggot beating." The street was now empty. I continued to walk home. Across the street from the block my house was on, I heard some noise behind me. Apparently 4 guys had left the house. I couldn't outrun them, but I didn't want them to know where I lived. I figured they'd just call me some names, see some of the adults around, and go away. Well, the adults got out of there at the sight of trouble. The kids did call me some names, and after a short while, one of them started punching me in the mouth. Then they ran off. One of my front teeth fell onto the sidewalk. The other was hanging in my mouth by a thread. There was a lot of blood. I picked up the truth and hurried home, put the tooth in a glass of milk, and stuck a towel in my mouth. When my grandmother saw me, she went into hysterics. A cable repairman we know came in. He'd witnessed the whole incident, but said it was against regulations to interfere. Grandma can't drive, and the cable guy wasn't allowed to take me to the dentist, so I drove through town with a bloody towel stuffed in my mouth to the dentist, with Grandma sitting in the passenger seat. Now the worst is over. The teeth were unbroken, so the dentist was able to put them back in. I received a tetanus shot to prevent infection, and Monday I'll have 2 root canals. I have identified the youths, and the police have caught them. The one who struck me was already on parole. 2 of them were 15, 2 were 16. None went to Corvallis High School, or any high school for that matter. They are being charged with intimidation and assault. Now all sort of groups, gay and straight, are planning events to promote tolerance in Corvallis. Tolerance isn't acceptance, but it's a start. A couple of people have made nasty remarks in the news reports about how I deserved it. I guess some people do anything to get on TV or in the paper. I can't eat, but I'm in no pain and can talk just fine. I could plan to continue my work with the 2 high schools' gay-straight alliances. Your friend, Paul. Paul's story sums up why it's the best of times and the worst of times. The greater visibility of lesbian and gay youth makes them a bigger target and more vulnerable, particularly in the 47 states where they have no legal protections. Those only states that do are Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Wisconsin. However, the attitude of these youth, they don't have to take it, that they expect authorities to support them, and the fact that for the first time there are things like gay-straight alliances and GLSEN chapters and other organizations ready to help them is what has changed. Things are not all better, no matter how many sitcoms have openly lesbian characters, no matter how many Fortune 500 companies grant partner benefits. But the fact that they are not all better is being named, and people are fighting back. That is the big shift in history today. And it's incumbent upon us, whether we be younger or older people, to push the force of history along one more step so that someday kids like Paul won't write letters like that anymore. Thanks for listening.
I'm looking at my watch, and I see that we have about 40 minutes. Is that correct? 35 minutes? Okay. And I'm going to encourage all of you, please, to ask questions. But being a process queen, I'm going to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, there's a mic over there, and is there a mic over there? For those of you who have questions, and again, this is primarily because this is being taped, go to the mic, identify yourself, and if you wouldn't mind, make sure that your question ends in a question mark, meaning let's keep them to questions, and if you have comments, share them with us, keep them brief so that we can get our panelists sharing with us their information. So if you've got a question, and I'm looking around, I see a lot of people who I know have questions, because they always have questions, please come up and get our panel started. Thank you.
Hi, great panel. I'd like to just make a response and then a question.
And who are you?
My name is Warren Blumenfeld. I live 100 miles from here in Lesbianville, USA, in Northampton, Massachusetts. My comment first is that Governor Roberts gave us some wonderful statistics about how things are getting better. I just wanted to give some of the other side of that. Newsweek magazine did a survey and asked whether we should have job opportunities, and 78% said yes, we should have job opportunities on a general level. But then when we have it down to the specific level, 46% said that we should not be allowed to be high school teachers, 49% said we should not be allowed to be elementary school teachers, and 52% said we should not be allowed to be members of the clergy. which is conforming to the societal stereotypes that we molest and recruit children and that we're sinners. My question is, I live 100 miles away from here, and I heard about this on the internet, and I'm here. I was in town, and I'm here. Why do we have such a small turnout for such a well-publicized event with such remarkable panelists? Do we need another Anita Bryant of 1977 to organize the community so that we have people coming out to remarkable events like this? What can we do to increase the political activism on the part of our members of our own community?
Warren, did you have anybody in particular you wanted to answer that question, or is it to the panel?
To the panel.
Okay.
Well, I think if I could solve that question for GLSEN would be a lot bigger. I think that there's so many things you brought up there I think that are really important. And actually we find in all these polls that when we get very specific about what the jobs are, that the 78% drops pretty fast and nowhere faster than around teachers. So let me take that one if I can, and then also take the second question. Having talked too long, I didn't read the other thing I wanted to read, which is I spoke at this terrible place in New Haven a few weeks ago, small college there. And at this, the day before I got to Yale, there was an article in the local paper about members of GLSEN, Connecticut who were teachers who'd come out of the closet. And as Governor Roberts attested, we were hanging out backstage beforehand. There's this myth, and those of you who live here know this, that New England is this really wonderful progressive place where it's just fine to be openly gay. And in fact, it was a big scandal that this article came out in the New Haven Register, and they had it as their sound-off question, the thing where you could call in and leave responses. I thought you might just like to hear a few of the responses in New Haven. Ron from Guilford says, the question was, should gay teachers discuss their sexual orientation with students? Ron from Guilford says, no way. If you get into other forms of deviant behavior, where do you draw the line? Matthew from Shelton says, if they do, they should be jailed for corrupting the minds and morals of our young students. Bob from Orange says, absolutely not. Teachers are role models. If they discuss their sexual orientation with students, it's bound to influence some students to experiment with or choose homosexuality. Do we really want that for our society? Total aside here. I'm fascinated by the right-wing people who are constantly criticizing our schools for being unable to teach. Somehow we can't teach math or reading to them, but we can teach sexual orientation, which I find quite fascinating. We can't teach you to read, but we can teach you to be gay. I guess our pedagogical skills go up real fast. I think they need to get their stories consistent on that side. Either we can't teach or we can. I think that this is a really volatile issue, obviously. I think next to gays in the military, there's probably no profession where it's harder for people to be openly gay than teaching. I can't tell you the number of members we have in Massachusetts, where there's not only been a gay rights law for almost 10 years, there's a Governor's Commission on Gay and Lesbian Youth, there's a program called Safe Schools for Gay and Lesbian Students in our schools, so on and so forth, who tell me they cannot come out in their schools. I'm astounded by it when I hear it. And it leads me to conclude that there is indeed persecution and opposition. I don't want to underplay that at all. But I think the real obstacle we're really facing is our own community for two reasons. Number one, among gay teachers, and I'm just going to name it, there is such an incredible level of internalized homophobia, such an incredible belief that even if there's 100 openly gay teachers who have wonderful careers and one who's been persecuted, that I'm going to be the one who is persecuted. I'm amazed by it. I've almost come to the conclusion that laws have no effect on people's behavior. Because I can come to states where there have been laws for 10 years, like Massachusetts, and there's still closet cases in Boston and Cambridge. And I can go to Utah, where there's laws against them, and there are teachers like Camille Lee, who was the open lesbian advisor to the Gay Straight Alliance at Kelly School. And I really think that we need to look at ourselves sometimes, and not the external factors such as laws and policies. If people like Camille Lee can be out at East High School in Salt Lake City, I really don't want to hear an excuse in Cambridge, Massachusetts ever again. And if that offends somebody, I'm sorry. The second thing, the part of the reason why it's hard to mobilize the community around this issue is, even though there is the gay bee boom going on, and there are lots of gay people who have children, the vast majority of people who vote in school board elections are people who have their kids currently in the school. As you probably know, only about 13% of eligible voters vote in the average school board election. which means you only have to get about 6.5% of eligible voters in your town if you want a seat. That's about 1 out of every 16 people, and maybe it's because I now live in New York, but I'm firmly convinced that 1 out of every 16 people is a total nut. All you have to do is get 1 out of those nuts out, and you win the seats. The right wing is much more compelled and organized around this. 54% of all school board members in this country are religious conservatives. They've done a very good job of monopolizing this issue, partly because we have conceded the field entirely. Gay and lesbian parents often are not out because of fears of the consequences for their own children. So the parents who are on our side, who should be fighting the fight, often don't feel they're in a position to fight it. And the rest of the community feels very separate from those issues for both good and bad reasons. For good reasons, in that we don't have kind of kids in our lives every day, so we're not thinking about it, so that's fine. But secondly, there's an incredible level of internalized homophobia among the adults in our community. Namely, we don't want to go back and address gay and lesbian youth issues because for the vast majority of us, that takes us back to the time in our life when we were most powerless, and we want to forget that time as much as we can. Our community has a very conflicted relationship with youth. On the one hand, we idealize them and objectify them. On the other hand, every kind of muscle queen in the South End, and that's, as a former South End resident, I can say that. And I think I still have a Mike's Gym membership card somewhere. But behind every fabulous gay adult I meet in Chelsea or in DuPont Circle in the South End or whatever, there's still the little sissy who slammed his hand in the door because he didn't want to go to gym class. And so much of our adult self-esteem sometimes seems to be based on running as far away from that time in our lives as possible. So I think that our community, to be effective advocates for young lesbian and gay people, needs to resolve, the adult community needs to resolve some of its own issues around this. And I don't have the solution for that. I mean, maybe we could set up massive therapy centers, I'm not sure. Warren actually, to out him a little bit, is a contributor to a new book I have coming out in the fall called Telling Tales Out of School, which is a collection of memoirs by lesbian, gay, bisexual people from their 20s to their 80s about what it was like to be a young person in school. And I tell you, I am more and more convinced that the dysfunction of our adult community can all be traced to what people experienced when they were kids. And until we deal with that, many of our problems, not just advocating for gay youth, but believing, for instance, that we are genuinely entitled to equal rights. Listening to Kelly talk, the thing there is how much we're raised to believe we don't deserve to be treated any better, that we deserve to live and therefore should use a condom, that all levels of the dysfunction in our adult community we can trace back to that young time in our lives. And then until we resolve that, I don't think we're going to see the kind of mobilization both you and I wish we would see around this issue or many other issues. Yes, I'm done.
And I'm not sure there's anything to add to that.
Hi, I didn't know if someone over there was waiting for a question. Did you want to ask something? No, okay. I'm Arthur Lipkin. I don't live 100 miles away. In fact, I live in Jarrett's upcoming district and have for the last 51 years. I'm a townie. And I do teach the only course at the Harvard Graduate School of Education with gay in its title that has to do with gay and lesbian issues in schools. I had a couple of comments and a question. I'm glad that you brought up, Kevin, the issue of why the adult community doesn't want to revisit some of these youth issues because of their own pain that they would just as soon forget. I also want to add something to your concept of why teachers remain closeted. Of course, there are those who fear the tires slashed in the parking lot, and those few who might fear actually losing their jobs or getting crummy assignments from their superior the next year, extra lunchroom duty, whatever it is that makes teachers miserable. But there's also, I think, a very clear concern, and perhaps a deserved one, although teachers, I think, can be talked out of it, that they will lose their effectiveness in the classroom if they are out to their students, that they will lose their respect, and that students won't feel they can learn from these people. And I think nothing is more important to a teacher than the capacity to inspire and teach these kids. And if they think that that is threatened, they are really going to back off from anything that would compromise that capacity. So I think that needs to be worked through. there was reference to the changing federal guidelines and some of the the youth risk behavior surveys that are done through the CDC that I almost said Charles, forgive me, Mr. Socarides. I wondered, though, if you could tell us the definitions that the most human service agencies and in fact, perhaps the feds in their guidelines for research on youth at risk that they issue do not include sexual orientation or have not historically included sexual orientation, so that people who want to do, people from our community generally and some straight allies who want to do research specifically targeted at gay youth at risk are not able to apply for the kinds of research funding that they need because it's not included in the federal definition of youth at risk. So I wonder if anyone is working on that at HHS or DOE or wherever those kinds of changes have to occur. Even at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where we have a youth at risk program, there's scant attention paid, and probably because the research funds and the prior research has been lacking.
Well, let me tell you, I'm not an expert on this, but I would be very surprised if there were any federal research funds that were available to study youth at risk, which were not available on an equal basis to people wanting to study gay, lesbian, transgender issues. I know that what the Center of Disease Control does is they put out each year a survey nationwide, and then they let each state tailor it to their particular needs. And actually the work of Governor Weld and this state of Massachusetts is, Massachusetts was the first state to modify the survey to include questions relating to gay and lesbian kids. And some very provocative questions. I mean, I think that there are some provocative questions in these surveys anyway that ask kids in high school about, how many sexual experiences they've had, what kind of sexual experience they've had. But Massachusetts was the first to include questions that asked kids about what, if they identified as gay, lesbian, or bisexual, and the gender of their partners. And now Vermont is doing some of that. And the CDC is encouraging other states to expand, to modify their state surveys to include more those questions, or to do it in more states. And that's how it eventually gets in the national survey. As more states do it, then they recommend it in the national survey. And that's something that, is sort of a very interesting sort of behind-the-scenes dynamic, and they're working hard on that. But if you, I would suggest that if you can identify a program that of a research grant that is for studying youth at risk that is not available on an equal basis, call me and let me know about it. Just call me at the White House. The number is 456-1414. It's in the phone book, 202-456-1414, and we'll do what we can to make sure that that is not the case, because it shouldn't be.
Well, before we get to another question, I actually am going to take speaker's privilege and ask a quick question. And this is for Ms. Socarides. Kevin, I also wanted to make a point. There's a woman who's a Cambridge resident named Polly Atwood, who's a teacher in Brookline High School. And Polly Atwood was in the news recently because she is a lesbian teacher and came out to her class and had some parents of one of the girls in the class, I think it was a 4th grade class, protest saying that, in fact, she had, I'm not sure what the legal claim was, they took it to court, that she had somehow damaged their daughter and her ability to get a quality education at Brookline, in the Brookline Public Schools. So for the record, we do have courageous teachers in Cambridge too, and in Massachusetts. Many of them doing good work, coming out as a matter of course. But my question actually to the attorney on the panel is, under this, you mentioned, and Arthur actually referenced, the change in the Title IX regs for the possible claim of sexual harassment. Is it possible that in the change of some of these regulations that somebody like Polly Atwood could find some defense in terms of protecting her position for this sort of claim, where she's being harassed by perhaps an administration which wasn't as friendly as it should have been towards her in defending her, or towards parents who are offended by her sexual orientation. Do you have any thoughts on that?
You know, I don't know, and I think that that is probably depends specifically on the specifics of what happened to this individual. Although the Department of Education regulations are aimed principally at protecting students in the schools, not teachers or administrators. And I suspect she was a teacher, right? Mm-hmm. And I suspect that her rights would be more broadly defined by sort of the by other laws and not by this Title IX. So the answer is I don't know.
Actually, let me pick up. There are a couple of things I want to say in response to that. One, specifically to answer your question a minute, but let me make these other comments. I'm very aware of the brave leadership of teachers in Cambridge. I want to personally thank Arthur Lipkin, who, for people who don't know, I believe was just about the first openly gay teacher in this state, and who, when I met him when I was a second-year teacher, made me realize that you could come out of the closet as a teacher. He taught at Cambridge Fringe and Latin for 20 years. So I want to thank Arthur, whose role in making this history in this state maybe has not been as noticed as it should be. Speaking of Polly Atwood, she was a high school teacher. Supposedly she had caused this young woman to have a nervous breakdown by coming out in class. And I was terribly excited by this news because I nicknamed Polly the secret weapon. I wanted to bring her to Washington and get her to meet Jesse Helms. I thought, you know, make them all have nervous breakdowns. Polly, go for it. You know, I thought if she has this amazing power, let's use her. She's like the stealth weapon. But the parents have since dropped the suit. The specifics about Title IX, and this actually points to a place, you know, I hear a lot of gay people in terms of political mobilizing think, well, you know, I don't want to write a letter to Washington, whatever. You really can call Richard's office. He even answers the phone half the time. He's not joking with that number. Call it. He'll help you. He's done it for me. But people feel like Washington's very distant. That the reality is that it's 15,000 separate school districts in this country, and almost all the power around your education system resides in that local district, not in Title IX regulations or things like that. This is a place where you really can make a huge difference by getting your local district to act. The specifics around Title IX, which for those of you who aren't familiar with it, was the law around sexual harassment. It's been interpreted now to where, and many of us have seen this kind of harassment happen in schools. Like if it's a young lesbian student like Kelly, and like boys say to her, hey, all you need is a good lay, and we'd turn you around. That has now been interpreted to be sexual harassment, even though it's also homophobic harassment, and now Kelly would have those Title IX protections, which is very, very important as a precedent. But the reality is that we got to quit hoping that like the Department of Education or Title IX or something like that's going to ride into the rescue for us. It's very important to have those regulations, but in the end, it's your local school board that has the vast majority of the power. And this is really an area where I think the federal government takes a bum rap, quite honestly, quite often, because they really have very limited power of education, which is both good and bad news. Bad news when people like Richard are there to do good things, and they don't have the power to do it. But good news for those of us who live in local communities, because we can have a big impact by next Monday showing up at the school board meeting.
Hi, my question is actually for Ms. Peterson. My name is Camille Redmond, and I'm a sophomore at the college. And my question is, what message would you like to send to schools and universities in dealing with LGBT issues? What kinds of things would you say to both gay and straight youth?
The message that I always wanted to be sent to schools regarding their gay students is that these schools are not tapping a very valuable, very vital source in the school. I mean, the kids in the Gay Straight Alliance just amaze me. They're brilliant, they're creative, they're wonderful kids. They're very caring and sensitive towards each other. And the school system was neglecting them. That is what the schools are doing to these kids. And some kids are getting extremely lost in the system and not even being able to find the Gay Straight Alliance or the kids who are meeting it just to have acquaintances. And these kids are the kids who are killing themselves. So these schools are essentially, providing the basis for which these kids are going to kill themselves. The message I would like to be sent to gay kids is that they are not alone. There's always somebody else at the school. It's just a matter of finding them. That's what the Gay Straight Alliance should be for, is for the kids who need to socialize with somebody else like them. That's what it's for. And so when this message comes together, you need this, they need this. Okay, why aren't we having these? that's what the schools should be thinking about when they're banning gay straight alliances or not letting them in.
Hi, my name is Myung Lee, and I'm a student here at the Kennedy School. I have a question, I guess, for the whole panel. It seems to me that when you talk about introducing queer youth issues in a lot of places in the country, that there's sort of a continuum of controversiality, that some things are more difficult to do in terms of tactically than other things. If you have things like protecting youth from physical and verbal harassment or intimidation, that might be something that's relatively, not that it's easy in many places, but relatively easier to promote than having something on the other end of the other end of the spectrum, like talking about gay and lesbian issues in the classroom generally or in the curriculum. So my general question is whether it's advisable to try to have an incremental strategy of some sorts in an environment that's not going to be very supportive, to try to do the easiest things first and work your way toward the harder controversies. You might have gay-straight alliances and clauses protecting teachers from discrimination in employment somewhere in the middle, and then work your way up toward eventually having themes talked about in the classroom. Is that advisable, or is that sort of too clinical to really work in practice?
Well, let me just say that I think, broadly speaking, I think we need to do a range of things, and that different people in different organizations are better suited to do different things. Let me tell you that for someone who's worked in Washington now for 6 years, you have to be incredibly patient, and you have to really believe that incremental change can make a difference, and have to have a very high level of comfort with frustration to work there, especially since 2 years after the president took office, we have a Republican Congress. I say to people all the time that I think the single most thing that's had the most negative impact on our movement in the last 10 years is when the Democrats lost control of the Congress 4 years ago, because the Democrats, and like it or not, there are a lot of great Republicans, especially in this state, but nationally the Democratic Party has been the party that's been willing to push this agenda, and quite frankly, it's been a standoff for 4 years on all these controversial issues. So we're trying to make progress for this movement in the middle of what is really a very serious cultural war in Washington, and you see that we get caught in it all the time. So I think that there's that on the one hand, and people in Washington need to buy into that strategy as something that makes sense. But on the other hand, I think we need people, out in the country and in Washington who are always pushing people to do harder, and who won't permit or stand for compromise, and who are willing to scream and yell about it, and ask our political leaders to make decisions that are more based on conscious rather than political expediency, or rather than political calculation. Because I actually don't think that we make many decisions based upon political expediency. I think we make more decisions in Washington based upon political pragmatism, and choosing your battles and what parts of the agenda you can get through, and what battles you don't want to pick because it sacrifices larger goals. But I think your other point about what issues we should pick. The president last year, for the first time, became the first president to ever have an administration-sponsored civil rights bill that included gays and lesbians, and it was the hate crimes bill, and it is the bill that's now pending in Congress that for the first time would make a hate crime against a person because of their sexual orientation a federal crime. And because it is a hate crime, because hate crimes are sort of easier for people to go along with, we have a lot of bipartisan support for this bill. And I would argue that if we can get this bill passed this year and make it the first piece of federal legislation which protects gays and lesbians, that will be a substantial victory. And just like the African American community did when in the 50s and early 60s when they started organizing, they picked things that were sort of easier to get through. I mean, they didn't start all the way over here. And from that, I think, will flow a lot of other things. So I am, sort of in the nature of my job, but I'm a believer that at least for people who are participating in the national political debate, that the better thing to do is to take baby steps and to move things along incrementally, because I think it will bring us further in the long run.
Short answer to your question is yes. And I really believe that. I think that you do, as Richard said, have to pick the battles you can win. And if you look back in American education history, the third rail has always been curriculum. Go all the way back to the Scopes trial in the 20s. That whenever there's any feeling that like there's a curriculum being, in Colin Powell's often used and Freudian metaphor during the gays in the military debate, pushed down their throat, people rebel. I think that we've made it very clear that our priority right now is to put in place protections for lesbian and gay students from harassment, protections for teachers from being fired, and to ensure the right of students to organize gay-straight alliances. That does not mean that I don't also want to see curriculum reform, but I think that you need to figure out what is the right strategy for your community. We will be launching, and this has been 2 years in the works, our first major push around curriculum this year. The Out of the Past film, which Kelly is featured in and which Barbara mentioned, is a film on lesbian and gay history put together by a team of people from GLSEN with the explicit idea of it being shown in U.S. history classes. We never dreamed this would win the Sundance Film Festival or be on PBS. We started with a much more modest goal. We're excited those things have happened, though, because we think it will help it achieve its original goal, which is to make sure that kids in U.S. history classes see a film that teaches them that lesbian and gay people have always been part of this nation. I think that this will be an unbelievably controversial thing in many areas of the country, and will be very, very difficult. I think that you're completely right in your analysis, and I'm not necessarily uncomfortable with it. I think that rather than ask for every single thing I want and not see protections put in place so that kids are not harassed and they have a right to have a gay-straight alliance because I'm trying to get all 23 items, I think that's irresponsible on my part, frankly. That in a system where kids are getting beaten up every day around this country and they don't have any protections, that my moral obligation is to make sure that we try and stop the violence as soon as humanly possible. It's like being at the scene of an accident. When someone's bleeding, right now you try and stop the bleeding and then you figure out the next step. Right now we're focused on stopping the bleeding, and I think that is probably, even winning those protections is still very difficult in the vast majority of this country.
I'm just looking at my watch. Just a second. We have about 5 more minutes, so we have time for one question after this gentleman.
I'm John Landry, a student here at the Kennedy School. Question for Mr. Jennings. Recently, the Roman Catholic bishops, of all people, issued a letter on gay youth, urging parents not to disown their gay children and to accept them to a limited degree. We still have a ways to go. As an openly gay board member of a Catholic high school, I wonder if GLSEN has any plans on building on the momentum of that in Catholic education.
Absolutely. In fact, I want to get your card afterwards. We have a Catholic Schools Task Force, and one of the recipients of our Pathfinder Award last year was the Archdiocese of Oakland, where they have Gay-Straight Alliance in all Catholic high schools in the Archdiocese. So I think, yes, are you listening, Cardinal Law? Is he still here? I don't even know. I've been gone for so many years. God, some old queens won't die. But the fact of the matter is that I think that every school, public, private, or parochial, has an obligation, as Kelly said, to make sure that every child thrives. Religion is not an excuse for child abuse, period. Even as you pointed out, the Catholic bishops are recognizing that fact. And there are some very courageous parochial schools around the country. St. Peter's Prep in Jersey City, I can name specific ones that are doing really good work on this issue. And I think that it's very important that we expand that work. And if I can add in a little kind of codicil to that, we also need to recognize that the voucher scheme that the Republicans are pushing right now in Congress is very dangerous, because what it could do would be to literally dismantle the public school system as we know it and allow people to use your tax money to send their kids to private religious schools. And if you think it's hard to win this fight in a public school, it's much harder in a parochial school, Lord forbid a Baptist or a Mormon school. So I think that we need to realize that the voucher discussion going on right now in Washington, D.C. is all about gay issues, frankly. And it will cripple anything GLSEN is going to be able to do if that goes through. Because even though we do have some very promising signs with some Catholic schools, like in Oakland, The vast majority are behind where public schools are in their community. And it's a much harder fight because you have a whole other set of conversations around theology you have to have.
Hello, my name is Scott Boulay, and I'm a second year here at the Kennedy School. And I wanted to first thank Adam and Myung for all the work that they did to put this together. The last time I asked a question in this forum, the speaker was Gary Bauer of the Family Research Council, and there was a sea of rabid, nasty conservatives, so this is quite a nice change. I had a question for Kelly. I graduated from high school in 1991, and I'm amazed and impressed and in a way mystified by the amount of courage it must take to come out when you're in high school. And I'm wondering about how you all handled the safety issues that raises, how you manage to protect each other, because I think that's a concern that's a primary concern for students who are in that situation.
One of the fears of the kids in the Gay Straight Alliance was that we were going to be outed and beat up in the hallways. So we worked out a pretty elaborate buddy system. We all had whistles around our necks. Most of us carried mace. And we just decided that nobody was ever going to catch us alone. If any of us had to walk home, we worked out rides, and we got ourselves as figured out as we could.
Yeah, and I would say that makes every adult gay person in this room furious. If it doesn't, I really wonder where we are as a community. To think of them having to carry mace around their school just makes me livid. I just hope it makes people, if they heard that correctly.
And the amazing thing is, if you see this film, which hopefully you will all see soon, and the net proceeds go to Kevin, right?
Go to GLSEN, not Kevin. Thank you. And specifically go to our Student Pride program, which is to fund the creation of more gay straight alliances around the country.
But your courage, as exhibited in that film, and the calmness with which you all, protected each other was really, truly remarkable. It's really an inspirational film, and it was directed and produced by Jeff Dupre, and Andy Tobias, who was speaking in the afternoon panel, it was the executive producer and a very famous Harvard alum.
If it makes you feel any better, none of the kids are carrying mace anymore.
It does make me feel better. I mean, also, you'll see in the film, there were death threats made specifically on Kelly's life. And the wonderful story is that isn't happening anymore. And the wonderful story, I think, of the whole panel is that there are young people like Kelly who, in spite of those climates, have stepped forward and say, I'm not going to take this anymore. Because if you paid attention in history class, that every great change in history, people didn't wait until it was safe. People just said, I can't wait any longer to have my rights. I want them now, and I don't care about the consequences. And that's why I put Kelly with people like Rosa Parks and other incredibly courageous people who knew it was the right time, even if other people didn't.
Could you join me in a round of applause for our panel?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is going to conclude the morning forum. The afternoon starts at 2 p.m. If you want to.
Yeah, I just want to thank all our panelists again, and I know you'll come back after lunch for the second panel, which will be on a variety of issues focusing on marriage and family. We'll be selling box lunches in Belfer Hall. I'm not exactly sure where that is, but Myung can tell you. Downstairs, under the tunnel, on the elevator on your left, taking all the way up to the fifth floor, Bell Hall. Yeah. We'll try to guide you over there. Yeah. And see you all back here at 2 o'clock. Thanks.
Chevers?
We were just talking about you. We were just talking about you.
Actually, that guy was very helpful.